Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, I'm David Goldstein, President of Mekko Graphics. I wanted to welcome you to our webinar. What we're going to be doing in the next 30 minutes is introducing you to some productivity features in Mekko Graphics. And I've got 10 tips that I will work you through. I will save some time at the end. If you have some questions, I'll stick around past the half hour, and I'm happy to answer them. One of my colleagues will be monitoring the chat feature, and will be able to answer your questions during the webinar if you've got questions about the specific charts that we're creating or specific features of Mekko Graphics. We will record this webinar, and we will make the webinar and this PowerPoint presentation available to you. We will send this out as an email. We'll send you out an email link later in the day with information about both the video and the presentation. We will send that to all of the attendees of the webinar and to all the people who signed up and were not able to make it. Great. Well, I'm just going to dive in and get started. Go through these tips, and I hope you'll learn something that'll make it a little quicker for you to create Mekko Graphics charts. So let me start with the first one. So the first one I want to show you has to do with formatting numbers in your Mekko Graphics charts. There are a couple of ways to do that. You can see here in this chart that we've got number formatting in our bar totals and in our y-axis and in our data rows. So I'm just going to double click on this chart to get us going. And I will show you the two different ways you can change the number formats. There's the one that's always been there in Mekko Graphics, which is to click on Format, the Numbers button in the Format section, which brings up this dialog here and allows you to select or multi-select, and then to change the number format here. Say if I wanted to change this from billions to millions, I could do that here. If I wanted to add a decimal place, I could do that here as well. The newer approach that we added relatively in a relatively recent version of Mekko Graphics is to give you the ability just to multi-select, so I can select any of my bar totals, any of my y-axis numbers, and then right-click, and then in this floating toolbar here, this gray menu, we have number format for label group. So you can just click here, and you see a very similar dialog to before. So if I want to get rid of my decimal place, change this back to billions, I can just do that with a couple of clicks. So just the notion of choosing any example number, and then right-clicking will bring out this number format option here. You can do the same with data rows. So you can click on both of these data rows, and you can change the number format of the data rows here as well. So that's just a nice little clever trick, a nice little time saver that just to get you started with our productivity tips. Second tip is another feature that we added relatively recently to Mekko Graphics, and it's the ability to switch the bars and series in your data set. So sometimes your data for a chart comes in as a column, like here in this little P&L statement. P&L statements often come in as a column, but you want to show the data as a row. And in this case, if you want to show the P&L as a cascade chart, you would show the data in a row. And the way to change that is just this button right here. Here we have this button in the Mekko Graphics data editor, switch bars and series. So you don't have to transpose the data when you enter it. You just need to hit this switch bars and series button, and it will treat each row of data here as a bar and each column as a series, as opposed to without the button, it would do the reverse. So a nice trick, a nice little button here, switch bars and series right here in the Mekko graphics data editor. So second tip. Third tip is a little more time consuming, but I do want to emphasize that Mekko graphics will work in either PowerPoint or Excel. And a lot of our customers are finding ways to more productively work if they mix the Excel and the PowerPoint versions of Mekko graphics. So I'm going to show you how you might do that. One approach would be to create your chart here in PowerPoint and link the chart to a data range in Excel. So if I have Excel data here and I highlight it, I can take this chart, my existing chart, double click it, and here in my link to Excel menu, I have the notion of linked to selected range. So if I click on link to selected range, you can see now the chart border is green, which indicates that this chart is linked to a range in Excel. Let me just move my Excel over here so you can see it. And if I change any of my Excel data, then the Mekko graphics chart will change as well. So this data, or the Mekko graphics, if I change this Excel data, say to 300, then you can see the border on the chart is now red. And if I want to update my data, I just click on Link to Excel, refresh, and it will change the data here. You can see it changes, and it changed the border back to green. So if you created charts and you also have the data in PowerPoint, and you want to be able to easily update the charts when your Excel data changes, you can just use this link to Excel capability to do that. So that's one way to work with Mekko graphics in PowerPoint and Excel. A second way is to use our Excel add-in, which is right here. You can see in this Excel menu, and this gives you a couple of options. One is you can create a chart in Excel based on a range of data. So I can just highlight the data here and say, well, let me make a cascade chart in Excel from this data. And here's my chart right here in my Excel spreadsheet. The switch bars and series button is in a slightly different place because we don't have the data editor. So if I just click switch bars and series, and then I choose my bars that are going to be total bars. Now I've got my Mekko graphics chart in Excel, and this chart is live, linked to this Excel data. So if I change my Excel data here, the chart will automatically update. So if you just need your data and your chart in Excel, you can create your chart right here in Excel. This chart you can also copy and paste it into your PowerPoint presentation, and it will behave just like the linked to Excel chart that we created just before. So it will have a green border. If the data changes in Excel, the border will change to red. The link to Excel feature will work just the way I showed you a minute ago. So that's your second option, is to create a chart in Excel and either leave it in Excel or copy and paste it into PowerPoint. And your third option is to highlight the data in Excel, click Chart in PowerPoint, and Cascade. It'll move you over to PowerPoint. I can put a new slide on my chart. And then it'll give you this little Mekko graphics icon here. And if I just click in any slide, it will create a chart based on the Excel data and place it right here in my PowerPoint slide. So I can make my total bars again. Put my links in, do any adjustments that I want to do to this chart. And again, this chart has the green border. It will be linked to that named range in Excel. And if you change the data in Excel, the border will change to red, and the same link to Excel refresh link is available here. If you want to create this data, basically just to save you the copy paste step, create the chart based on the Excel data, but remove the link, you can just click on this remove button and it will remove the link, and now you can just work on the data sheet right here in PowerPoint. So this gives you the option of a quick way of creating a chart in PowerPoint based on data in Excel, and then just manipulating it in PowerPoint moving forward. So a bunch of different options. I would really encourage you to play with those different options, see which works best for you in terms of improving your productivity, but be aware that there are different approaches to working with Mekko graphics in Excel and in PowerPoint, and one of them might make you a bit more productive than you currently are. And I'm happy, this might be a good thing if you've got more questions about how to do this or questions about how to apply this to your organization. I will, again, after the webinar and be available to answer your questions. So next tip is data scaling. Another nice Mekko graphics feature. Sometimes your data comes in raw numbers, like in this chart, craft beer, the number of barrels produced. But you want to show your data like this, with reduce it, make the chart a little cleaner, and show it as 7.2 with an M for millions. Very easy to do that in Mekko graphics. Let me just show you how to do that. It's right here with the number format options by clicking on the number button. And right here, under the different number format options, we have the data scaling. So I can just take this. Each click of this little spinner will divide by 10. So if I click it 6 times or change it to number 6, I've reduced I've divided by 1,000,000. And now I can just change my grand total and bar totals up here to show with the suffix of M. So very easy, very quick, very nice way to scale your data, simplify your chart, make it a little more readable for your audience. Okay, next trick I wanted to show you was next tip was managing labels. Sometimes you've got some really small bars in a chart, especially in a bar Mekko, but also in a Mara Mekko chart, and you want to figure out a way to display these bars more reasonably. So you've got a couple of options for that. One is you can highlight a label and just move it. And when you move it, it'll draw that little line there. and that works sort of kind of okay. You do have these alignment buttons that allow you to align, say, the tops of these labels. So at least Atlanta and Boston will be lined up. So that's one way. And by default, we draw these annotation lines to our labels. If you want to remove them, that's right here in Show Hide Annotation Line. So that's one option. Let me restore those labels. Let me show you another option here, which would be to slant the labels. So you can highlight all these labels here, and then right-click, and then in the upper right-hand corner of this toolbar, you have options for label orientation. So you can make these labels vertical, but in this case, I would make these labels slanted. Now you can see they fit a lot better slanted than they did in the other ways. And if you want to move this population so it is under the labels better, I would just use my lasso, highlight all those labels, and then move them. One other little trick, little bonus trick, sometimes in a data row, you'll see that the label is wrapped, like here population is above the M. If you want the label to be unwrapped, it's just right-click on the label, and that label has an auto-wrap feature. And then if you click off the auto-wrap, it will unwrap. That works also for y-axis labels. If you have a really long y-axis label and you want it to and it's on multiple lines, you can click off auto-wrap and it will not auto-wrap. So just that's a little bonus. The other thing I wanted to point out on this chart is that when you move a label, as we move these population labels, it takes on these little blue corners in the four corners there. The blue corners indicate to you that this label is moved. It will update if your data updates, and it will try to stay in the same place if your chart data moves. So if some of these bars moved, these labels might be out of place relative to the bars. But if you want to put it back, any labels to put back in their original place, you could always right-click and say restore. That'll move the labels back to where they were. Also, one thing you might notice in a chart, if you edit a label, say even by putting a line feed in it, it'll take on these little red corners. These red corners indicate that the label has been modified by you, in which case now the label will not change or move when the data, if your data changes, because this label is now what we call user modified. So if you want to undo that, you can just click restore and the label will be back to normal. So that's little clues to know why you've got these red and blue options for your labels. On to the next thing I wanted to show you, a very quick trick, but I think very useful, is axis scaling. So one thing you can do very easily in Mekko graphics is clicking on an axis, brings up these little arrows. You can see this arrow up here and this arrow here. If I want to change my y-axis maximum, I can just click on that arrow and drag it down. If I want to change my tick interval, I can just click on this arrow and drag it down. So without even having to open Format Axes to change your axis scale, you can very quickly change the scale of your y-axis. So I like that tip. It's very, very quick, very easy, and very useful. Switching off simple and more complicated tips, I want to show you an approach I use working with Excel to create relatively complex charts based on data that you get from the internet. So I don't. Some of you might know that every week I create a chart of the week. I look to the internet for data, but I'm assuming that you also, in creating your some of your charts, will grab some data from the internet. So I found this data on the internet I thought was interesting. It is a list of the most Instagrammed tourist locations in the world. I copy and pasted it. It has these 5 columns in the data, and I think about a little less than 500 different attractions are listed here. So I wanted to take this data and create a Mekko chart that looked like this, where I wanted to organize my data by region. So to do that, I did a couple of things. After the copy-paste, I created a lookup table using Excel's VLOOKUP function, and took all of the countries listed in the data and assigned them to a region. So I had 3 regions: Europe, North America, and ROW for rest of world. So when I made this little VLOOKUP table, I then created this region column using this VLOOKUP function in Excel, which I then added here. And from these now 6 columns, I created a pivot table. And the pivot table has, as its columns, the 3 regions, as its rows, all the attractions, and as its data, the number of Instagram posts. So then I could just highlight my data and create the pivot table, create the Mekko graphics chart, either in Excel or in PowerPoint, based on that data. So you can see all the data is here, just as it was in my pivot table. I used the other function in the bars and series options other to create a new row. And then I took everything with less than 1 million Instagram posts and placed it in my other section. And I did some data scaling here as well. Yes. So very easy, very quick to take a lot of very complicated data with a combination of VLOOKUP, pivot tables, and Mekko graphics, and turned it into a Mekko graphics chart. So I would encourage you, I know if you're familiar with VLOOKUP and pivot tables, that's probably pretty straightforward. If you've never heard of either of them before, I would encourage you to dive into those, take a look at what they can do, and maybe figure out how to integrate them into your chart creation. So another couple of few tips left. One is using data rows and data columns. I would assume that many of you already use data rows and data columns in your charts. They are a great way to add additional data to your chart. They align nicely with the body of your chart, so you can see the data rows in Mekko graphics automatically align to the center of the columns of the data of the chart itself, and data columns align with the last bar on the chart, although they are all adjustable. Here I adjusted them so that they're evenly spaced. Creating data columns and data rows is very easy. Just here in bars and series, you can say, you put your data in your spreadsheet. Put your data in your spreadsheet, including the data that goes in the data rows or the data columns. And then you just show that data. Just tell Mekko graphics in bars and series that you don't want the data on the chart. You want it to appear as a data row, or you don't want the data on the chart, you want it to appear as a data column. And the data rows and data columns, each of them can be formatted differently. And you can add totals. This is a new feature we added relatively recently to Mekko Graphics. So you can add a total to a data column. You can see the total is right here, the total for my percentage and the total for my total number of aircraft. So those are data rows and data columns. The next nice little feature I wanted to show you is bar gaps. This is one big chart, but I wanted to put my data column in one of my data columns in the middle of my chart. To do that, you can add a bar gap to your data. So if you the data originally looked like this, but if you just click on the spaces in between the bar and dragging a little will increase the size of the overall gaps between all of the bars. Dragging a lot, you can see that the mouse over changes. Once I pass the edge of this bar, it's going to say add one gap. And this will add up basically a bar the size of any of these bars between those two bars. I don't know if that made sense. I hope that made sense. So that gives you basically a bar gap which you can use to put data in. So again, right-clicking on the bar and dragging will give you that bar gap. Clicking on the bars and dragging a little will increase the space between the bars and obviously reduce the size, the width of each of the bars as well. So those are nice little features of Mekko Graphics. Very easy to adjust the look of your chart by changing the bar gaps. Last feature I wanted last tip I wanted to share with you is doing multiple charts on a slide. So sometimes you want you feel you want to organize your data by taking one chart and making it look like two separate charts by adding this bar gap. Sometimes you want to make two different charts on a slide. So here I've got a chart on the left and a chart on the right. I want them to look very similar. I want them to align with each other. I want the colors to be the same. I want the data columns to be the same. The easiest way to do that is to use the copy-paste feature. So basically, what I would do is create one of these charts. Let me just duplicate this slide. I would create one of these charts, and then I would copy it, Control-C, Control-V, paste it, and now I can align it with my other chart. And then I would just double-click on the second chart, open my data, and paste in the new data here. And then I've got a real head start on my formatting, and I can come up with two charts that look very close to the same with a minimal amount of extra effort. So I like that as a nice tip, as a way to get your charts, to get two charts on a slide looking as good as possible. So those are my 10 tips. That's my half hour. I try to stick close to the time on these webinars. As I said at the start, we recorded this, so if I went too quickly, you can go in and go through the recording and focus on any of the 10 tips and try to watch a little more slowly. I would encourage you to explore our website because we have a bunch of other resources available for you. We have videos, webinar videos, how-to videos. We have the chart gallery, which is great. It's got 150 different charts that you can start with. We've got some toolkits. We've got a new presentation up there on mastering chart selection, how to choose the right chart given your data. My favorite, obviously, is the chart of the week, which I do every week to highlight Mekko graphics and try to share some interesting data. And we also are available for support in a bunch of different ways. In the Mekko graphics toolbar, you can email support up here if you've got a technical problem, or you can send an email to our Ask an Expert team if you've got a charting question. So I would encourage you to do those things. We even recently added chat to our website, so you can have the ability to chat with our team during our business hours. And we're very active on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and on Facebook. You can follow me or follow Mekko Graphics and learn what we're doing and see some chart examples that way as well. So I want to thank you for listening to my webinar. I hope it was helpful. I hope some or all of the 10 tips were useful to you. I will stick around and be available to answer questions. I will monitor the questions and the chat on the GoToWebinar, and just reach out and start typing and let me know how I can help you. And thank you again so much. And I hope you enjoyed the webinar.